we are going to jump right in and get on to having our fireside chat. But first, I do need to make sure I'm changing my background, because it's not feasible to have a fireside chat without having a fire.
Oh, okay.
So
it's kind of a beautiful day out there. I don't know if we really need a fire today, but it's great. I'm glad we've got one. Maybe it'll keep us kind of moving the conversation.
Yes.
Our conversation will be, really stoked.
Well, Paul, we welcome you to join us. And what you have on this Zoom, and most folks, I think, have their cameras on intentionally so that you can get to know some of the people that are part of this team, since we're not meeting in person, is groups of folks that serve as campus communicators or leaders of marketing from across the university, whether it's in the medical center or in booth or an ARD or in any of the schools and divisions. So it's a wonderfully robust group of very committed professionals, 250 people strong, that are particularly keen to hear some of the things that you're focused on and some of the things that you're doing. I was at an event in the city earlier this morning where President Alivisatos was sharing and presenting, and just did an extraordinary job sharing not only his philosophy about higher education, but some of the goals that he was focused on at the university. If you'll give me and indulge me, I will never give the introduction that the host, Mary Lou Gordo, gave this morning. But I do want to tell you a couple things about President Alivisatos, who I understand this is now your 29th day of being with us.
Since you're counting, I'll go with it. Yeah.
All right, we'll go with 29.
I just feel immersed, So.
Okay. So he is now our 14th president of the university. He is truly distinguished higher education leader and a world-renowned chemist. He came from University of California, Berkeley, where he served as executive vice president and provost, as well as a professor of nanoscience and nanotechnology. He has many awards, including the National Medal of Science, the Wolf Prize in Chemistry, and the Priestley Medal. And of course, as all of you know by this point, actually did his undergraduate work here at the University of Chicago. So he really has a deep familiarity. And as you listen to him talking about what drew him back to the university, I think it will turn out to be many of the things that drew each of you here, and the things that you find important today. And so we're going to hopefully, Paul, dig into some of these things with you today.
I sure hope so. Paul, let me just start by saying I feel very fortunate to have a chance to get to know some of you by this medium. I mean, it's not the most, it's not the easiest way to start to get to know each other, but we've all made do for the last period of time trying to get to know each other via the flatland of Zoom. So I'm glad to see you. And I just also want to acknowledge that those of you who are involved in helping the university to talk with the world about the university, you're also helping us hear from the world. And it's a two-way path. And you represent a vital part of the connection between the world of the university and the world at large. And that connection point is such a crucial part of what I hope will shape the university in future years. So I view this conversation as an important introduction to strategic partners. So I'm hoping to really use this as an occasion that we can then build from.
Super. Well, thank you for saying all of that. And one of the things that you've talked about, Paul, since coming on board is the importance of listening, and you've been doing a great deal of listening. But you're 29 days in, and I wonder if there are some things that already are standing out to, or you're learning that you think are going to start helping shape as you think about your upcoming tenure.
Yeah, sure. So I am early in my listening, and there's lots of places I haven't yet been. And each time I'm out visiting, I learn things that I didn't know. So please take this as just a set of steps along the way. But it does, I'll just say that coming back to the university, I still see, of course, this amazing culture of rigorous thinking, debate, discussion, and really the love of ideas and the creativity to create new ones, all very healthy. But also, I'm just so excited about the new relationships that have been emerging with the community over the last 15 years and longer. And so I'll just mention a couple of things based on 2 of my immersion days. I'm going to have, I don't know, 30 or so of these days when I spend an entire day in a school or college or with a particular community. And in those days, I'm meeting with all the constituents, faculty, students, staff, advisors. And I had a wonderful day out about in the community. We visited in areas of Bronzeville and Washington Park and South Shore and Woodlawn and so on. And in each of those, we met with some of the community leaders who were eager to work with us. So I see some really exciting potential and some new partnerships there that I'm really looking at. And it was, I have to say, that visiting, it's one thing to kind of know what some, to remember from college days and then to know kind of intellectually or from reading and so on, media, whatever, what's happening. But standing in Washington Park neighborhood, seeing so many vacant lots and a neighborhood that's really hurting so much, right across Cottage Grove, right across from a world-class park, designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. I really felt that very strongly. So I really view that as an important direction for us to think harder about how we're going to make things work better in that regard. I'll also share with you how important some of my visits have been, early visits. I haven't been to so many places, but I've been starting to learn a little bit about what's happening with our health and biosciences. And I'm just excited about the possibilities there. Biology is a field of inquiry that will advance enormously in the next 20 years. Just yesterday, I had conversations with people about 3 things. I just thought I'd mention to them. A faculty member, Chuan He, described to me a little bit about some of the work they're doing modifying RNA, and suddenly they're able to make agricultural plants and other plants grow to twice the volume they would have under the same conditions as ones without that modification. I mean, just think about that, the astonishing result. And Jeff Hubble, recently I heard him describing some of the work where they're able to do certain, make certain, introduce something like an inoculation that completely can alter autoimmune diseases. And just thinking about what's happening in that world of biology and discovery, it really excites me. I haven't yet had my visits with arts or humanities or the Crown School and so on. Those are all upcoming. So, it's an exciting moment for me in those listening events, and I'm going to use what I learned from those to try to help us build some new things.
Terrific. Well, we'll have you back hopefully and continue to share some of the things that you're learning and gathering. But you've been gone now almost 4 decades. And I'm wondering, as you look and say, well, this is what I remember and I still feel this, and this actually feels very different to me. How do you think about those?
Well, I'll tell you an anecdote. So we were talking about forming a faculty group to explore a certain topic the other day. And a few of the faculty involved in that, I had them coming to visit, and we were trying to, they wanted to discuss what would this thing be called? Would it be called a council? Would it be called a cooperative? Would it, what would the name of this entity that was going to explore some new ideas really be? And one of the faculty members came and had a very succinct, it was about 3 minutes of taking the 8 possible names analyzing their etymology, their history of use in Latin, Greek, and other languages, what their implications were, and what the connotations would be if we named it in different ways. And I'm sitting there at this meeting just thinking to myself, I'm back at the University of Chicago. I mean, this is just some things don't change, and that's just very, very fundamental. And it's how people think and talk and act, and it's just so it's wonderful. I mean, it's just great. So that kind of true aspect of what's in how we think about ideas and how we really try to get to the bottom of them, but we do it in a kind of really careful way like that. That's there. That's always been there. But certainly, I think at the writ large, the largest story that I see in the recent decades is this effort to see the university go from a place where all of that knowledge creation remains at its core, but it's not only looking inwards, it's also looking outwards, and it's becoming woven into partnerships with society writ large, local community, but also more broadly, the world of practice and the world of society around us, whether it's Pritzker School of Molecular Engineering or so many other parts of the campus where we see this kind of interconnection with the world of practice. I see that as having grown a lot. It's a different environment in that regard. So there's a kind of fundamental piece that stayed the same, and then there's this interconnection piece, which is beginning to grow and will be a focal point for me as I'm looking during my presidency to try to see how the university can become stronger. This issue of interconnection, engagement with society will be a focal point.
Good. Building on that just a little bit, and thinking through what you remember from your time ago, and how do you think that the education that you received here shaped your career and what you've been able to achieve?
Yeah, well, I do have to say, I joked about it a little bit this morning, Paul, in the forum that I was in there. Certainly, I have a very vivid memory. It would have been right around this time of year, 44 years ago. I was in a first-year student core curriculum class. We were reading Plato and hand-to-hand in our first paper on one of the dialogues. And its implications for how to lead a good life, actually, is what it was really about. It was dialogue. And wrote up my paper, handed it in, came back a week later, and it was completely covered in red ink. I mean, you couldn't see my text anywhere. It had just been completely dismantled. And I remember getting this thing back and just thinking, well, wasn't there anything I did here that actually helped? And it was quite an experience. But I remember it actually as being a starting point for learning how to. Which I really feel I learned so much of in my humanities and social science classes, the starting point of learning how to both how to propose a set of ideas and then to present them in a way that's more open-ended. It wasn't like in the sciences where often the questions would just have an answer that's a number or something. It was much more kind of creative thinking, but still very rigorous. And that's something that really sticks with me from my early education, was that although I went off in a science field, my experience in the core with humanities and social science actually influenced my life at least as much in every dimension. So I greatly value that. And I do think that those experiences I've brought to essentially every aspect of my life, whether from being a human being, a citizen, member of a family, all those things. Somehow the way in which people here tried to think about what would give a life meaning, it really impacted me.
Terrific. Well, outside of the work that you've done, and in the heart of the work, I guess, that you've done is getting some clear expertise in nanoscience and nanotechnology. And I think, as I mentioned to the folks earlier, you give quite a real detailed description on the current edition of Big Brains, which is terrific. But I wonder if you can just give folks a little bit of a background of how you got into your field of science, a little bit about what it is, and I think also importantly, the idea that you're going to continue working in a lab.
Okay, sure. Well, you know, it's interesting. I had a kind of love-hate relationship with chemistry when I was an undergraduate. I was going to study it, and I didn't want to study it anymore. I thought I'd do some other majors, and then somehow someone convinced me, one of my friends, to go back and try physical chemistry. I hated organic chemistry. I wasn't a good student at it. Suddenly I'm back in this class, and there was a lab. And in the lab, it's a funny thing, but this is what happened. In the lab, there was the study of this situation where there was a kind of whisker, almost like an atomic wire that was growing. And it was possible, it was in a vapor, and the vapor atoms were kind of condensing onto this wire, which was getting longer. And the lab could show from inference, from how the wire was growing, that atoms could have hit at any point along the length of that wire and then migrate to the very tip and add there. Okay, I mean, who cares? But for me, that captured my imagination. I'm just imagining these atoms and how they're moving, and then they're going to this spot, and I'm thinking to myself, I can't believe that somebody could actually know that that's what happened. And I liked that. It really appealed to me. In fact, in the field of nanoscience, so much of it is about learning that if you can take a very, very small object and place atoms in it with precision, then you can completely change what their properties are like. And by doing that, you can create materials that are both probes of fundamental laws of physics and chemistry, but also materials that have functions that can be used in the real world. And so that's kind of one of the core activities of nanoscience, if you like. And although I didn't realize it at the time, that one experiment kind of set my mind off with an image that has stayed with me for a long time and has influenced how I think about things. You asked about my current research activities, and all through the years as director of Lawrence Berkeley, provost at Berkeley, and so on, I've always maintained my research group because it's not something I do kind of out of a sense of duty. It's a true life joy and calling. I would feel somehow like my life wasn't complete if I weren't still engaged in those things. Plus, as a university administrator, having an actual research life helps you experience what it's really like to hear from students, to be with them, understanding what their struggles are like. It's grounding. So I do. We're preparing to move my lab still in Berkeley, but we're preparing to move it probably in June. And I'm using some of my listening tours to absorb what's going to be going on here, because a good research program will adapt to its environment a little bit. And influence it in turn. So we'll probably end up doing some things that are a little bit different when we come, but we're getting ready for it. It's going to be fun. Few students will come with me. We'll probably build up a new group here.
Excellent. And you'll have more time to be inside because of the winter than you had in Berkeley.
It's possible.
It's possible.
I am, I'm cautiously optimistic. The weather's held up beautifully so far. We'll see.
Good, good. All right. Well, one of the things that, Paul, of course, with all of your scientific accomplishments, one of the things that I heard this morning in a level of detail I hadn't heard before is what attracted you to higher education leadership. And I think it was a really telling story, probably about how you'll even lead this university. And I wonder if I can trouble you to share that story again.
Sure. I was engaged as a faculty member at Berkeley in a happy way, studying these tiny crystals, which, hearkening back to that wire, it's a small collection of atoms, and we would precisely control how we add other atoms to them to make an exact shape and size and so on, and then finding what the attendant consequences were. And there was a moment in time when my research group had some success, such that we knew how to make a certain kind of material, just a little bit better than other people did. That never lasts for very long. Once you share how to do it, other people eventually catch on, but it can take a few years sometimes. And so I was out there in the world visiting other universities, explaining these methods and what the consequences were. And people would invariably come up and say, but how did this exactly work? What do you do at this stage? We tried that, doesn't quite work, and so on. And it's in my nature, what I would simply say is, well, look, if you're having some trouble getting all that to work, just come on over to the lab in Berkeley, we'll show you how. And so that just felt right. And so one day I come back from one of these trips, and my students and postdocs were there kind of waiting for me, and they said, we've more or less had it with this. You can't invite any more people to come and visit the lab because we can't get any work done. We're spending all of our time sharing other people how to do this stuff, and we're not getting our own projects done. So cut it out. I'm sitting there thinking, well, gosh, this kind of a tragedy here, because sharing this with other people is a good thing. It's not a problem. And since I was involved, I had been invited to be part of some planning for the National Nanotechnology Initiative at the time, which was just about to launch. I had the opportunity to try to think, well, how could you do things that would be good for the nanoscience field? And so with some colleagues there, we proposed the idea of the molecular foundry, which is a national facility that now still exists decades later, that creates an environment. It's an environment where people can actually, in practice, in laboratories, share their state-of-the-art expertise with each other. So it's maybe about 1,000 scientists a year will go there from outside to share how they do things. And it's been an enormous success. It's accelerated the field enormously. But what I found in that experience, Paul, was that suddenly there were all these other methods and ideas for how to do things that our lab hadn't been involved in, and I started to learn them from other people. And I pretty quickly realized that community approach was really stimulating. I just kept learning new ideas, and then those new ideas would influence how my research group worked. And it was a great positive synergy. And that's what led me into enjoying these leadership roles. And it stuck. Subsequently, in other roles, I've always learned new ideas and new ways of thinking whenever I've been part of a community in a leadership role like that. And so that's something I've stuck with. As if I'm involved in a leadership role, I'm also going to be trying to absorb ideas that then can help me to be more creative as a scholar.
Okay, and maybe take that idea even a little bit further if you can. How does that work into how you like to structure the teams around you that are working, and how they work together, as importantly?
Yeah, well, a place like a university, it's almost hard to overstate the extent to which they are absolutely brimming, place like Chicago, absolutely brimming with people who are able to contribute in wonderful ways. And so I think one of our goals needs to be to try to create environments where everybody feels like what they're doing can be constructive, can add, can build on what the university is doing. So I'm kind of more of a community builder in that sense, and somebody who likes to see choosing projects that the community at large wants to adopt, and where many voices will come forward with good ideas and that will build on those. It's not, you don't want there to be just a few sources of these ideas in such a fertile environment of creativity. So it is my preference to try to create those kinds of opportunities so that and to signal that.
All right, terrific. Well, you're again just a month or so into your new role here, but I'm wondering, as you talk about the things that you're listening to, the things that you're seeing, what are standing out to you as some of the biggest opportunities for the university? And in particular, you've been using this wording of the engaged university quite a bit, and I wonder if you can tie the two of these things together for me.
Yeah, well, I do think writ large that the story of a great university like the University of Chicago today is that it's the universities that will be the most successful are ones that do become much more interactive and connected to society, and so in that sense engaged. And sometimes I mention this kind of place-based analogy. If we think about the original incredibly beautiful neo-Gothic quads, they kind of architecturally, they kind of define a perimeter, and they mostly look inwards. But a university of today will be much more porous, interactive, kind of connected, and not so circumscribed of inside and outside, but much more interconnected. And I see that as part of the picture. I have used this language of what I call vectors of engagement because I think in a university, there'll be this kind of broad base of activity, all the faculty, all the students, all the staff doing things that are just ideas that bubble up and that are wonderful. But to get the most success, we also need to have some areas where we imagine the possibility that many faculty, many students, many staff, many friends of the university, alums, community members, that we can work towards a common larger set of goals. And so I'll call those vectors of engagement. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to do something like that with our community work. There's an opportunity for us to do that, for example, in the bioscience, biotech arena. I'm pretty sure there'll be opportunities like that in the arts and a number of other areas around the university. So I'm listening now, trying to find a handful, maybe 6, 7 or something areas where some concentrated work, investment, and planning could help us to be preeminent in particular areas. And that kind of concentrated effort will help us to do that. So that's what I'm looking for during this fall term.
Okay, terrific. Well, this idea where you talked about being porous means that not only are we having to operate in our own community, but the influences of the outside world are impacting and shaping us. And if you think about what pressures or forces are on higher education institutions today, particularly select universities, what do you think, are you thinking about from an external perspective that you're keeping an eye on, and that as we think about really the goals and the communications for the university as a whole that we collectively need to be thinking about?
Well, so I think that we play a very special role because we are able to create an environment where all of us together can have the kind of rich intellectual environment that I was just talking about, but take that also with the responsibility to think about how our ideas can impact society at large. But stepping back for a moment from that, I think we all know that educational opportunity is something that's very fundamental to our society. We struggle to offer the right levels and sufficient education to a much broader group than what can possibly happen at one university and at one university like this. So I'm particularly interested in seeing what kind of partnerships we could establish in the coming years. I could imagine a scenario. We just signed an MOU over the summer that had been in the works for some time with the Chicago area community colleges. I'm really interested in thinking about how we might do something even much more intensive with the community colleges. we'll see how that conversation evolves. But I do see, as an example, I mean, just imagine a scenario where there's a satellite campus or entity nearby us, let's say hypothetically in Washington Park, that has the ability to help people get ready for some of the technical roles in biotechnology, in hospitals, and in data science areas. Those would fit with our kind of overall activities that we're doing inside the university, and yet they would also help people nearby us to who haven't had as much educational privilege to be able to take advantage of some educational opportunity to get jobs. That'd be great. So I think we have to be determined partners as part of helping access to education and high quality education to be successful, much like what is happening with many of our programs with charter schools and others around the area. There's a lot that we can do to help amplify what we do so that it helps solve what is the biggest problem in education, which is really expansion to large numbers of people in an affordable way. We can do that by these kinds of partnerships.
Okay, terrific. Well, the other part that comes out of this, of course, is the political world that we're operating in and the pressures of that world. And it was interesting as you came on board, one of the things that people were so eager to hear from you was your perspective on free expression. I think it came up in just about every conversation early on. And so I wonder if I could ask you to give a somewhat practiced answer at this point, because I think it's so important to this audience as well.
Look, I think it's deeply fundamental to the operation of a university, but specifically for this university, there's a really strong and I think wonderful tradition of truly valuing free expression as a core principle of the university. And it's there, that's really, it's a building block of a university precisely because the ability to question almost any idea, to question it and to be part of a really reasoned debate around it is fundamental to trying to find out what is and what is not right, true, or at least our best understanding of it at any given moment. So I view it as quite foundational. And it's one of many things that drew me back to this university is the fact that this kind of core free expression is built in so strongly, interwoven into the fabric of the university. It's there at all levels, and it's something I believe in very, very deeply.
Terrific. Thank you for all of that. Let me, if I can, because you are talking to a large group of communications folks, I would be remiss of not digging into really where communications helps fit into furthering the agenda that you've been talking about. And certainly you had a wide-ranging portfolio when you were at Berkeley. And I wonder, as you look back at that time, at where and how communications helped you further what you were trying to accomplish there, and what particularly worked for you that you want folks here to keep in mind?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I mean, I think that this issue of how to leverage communications, universities have distinctive styles, and also they have directions that they're evolving in, strategic directions that they're evolving in. And I believe that this issue of interconnectedness of the university with society is truly fundamental to the directionality that I want to see the University of Chicago go in. So I kind of prefaced this in my early comments when I first joined this group a little while ago, Paul, that I think the communication function is always important inside a university, but I view it as of outsized importance in this period of time, precisely because the university is making a kind of transition from this more looking inwards to this more kind of interconnected university. And that's all about communication, and it's about communication that goes in both directions. It's about hearing it's telling our story. You are, of course, communicating our story, but it's also you're part of a network of people that understand also how people are thinking about us, and we should reflect on that. So I view you as strategic partners in that regard, because you can help us understand how are we viewed, and what does that mean about how we're doing. It's a critical piece. So I see that as a really important. It's truly a strategic role for the university.
Terrific, great. Well, if I can, with the few minutes that we've got left with you, I'd like to open it up to the floor and jump into a few. And some folks are putting questions into the chat.
Questions in the chat, and maybe with some of those, I don't know, sometimes these chat questions pile up during a thing like this, and if we don't get to some of them, maybe we can answer them, separately afterwards. I don't like to leave questions dangling that we may not be able to get to.
Well, let me see if I can plow through some very quickly. And I'm going to actually, as a way to folks getting a chance to introduce themselves, Louise, do you mind, learner, introducing yourself and asking your question, please?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Louise Lerner. I do the writing for the physical sciences in the news office. And I was curious, so, you talked a lot about translating more of University of Chicago research and thought into action in society. And looking in through past instances when that has happened, I think we can all agree there's been both positive and negative consequences from that. And so, I'm curious how we go about making sure that what we do is not harmful. How do we go about making sure there's ongoing feedback from the communities that we want to help? Like, for example, like does the community need an academy to train, for technical jobs? Like that sounds like a wonderful idea to me, but do we ask the community, is that what they need?
We have to start. Yeah, thank you. We have to start from that point of view. I mean, thank you, Louise. That's a great question. And it's something that I feel is very real. So I have some thoughts. I know directionally that I'd like us to be in much deeper partnership with the community, but it means exactly that word. It has to be a partnership, and that means a lot of listening. So I did start, one of my first days was out listening to community leaders. I heard a lot of interest there and wanting to build with us. So some of the ideas I mentioned are ones which kind of came out of some of those discussions. But I think you're correct to point this out, that, and it's also true in the world of science that I live in. I mean, for example, almost any advance can be both do good things and not doing good things. And it's very important to be mindful of that and to think about, to be imagining that that's something that would be part of the planning or the discussions from the get-go. I'm struck by the wonderful, in my view, example of my former colleague Jennifer Doudna when they had first succeeded in developing the CRISPR-Cas9 whole genome editing process, which was awarded Nobel Prize a year ago. Just within weeks of doing that, she had called a meeting at Asilomar to bring together ethicists and people from the world of biotechnology and some philosophers and legal experts and a whole group of people to just think about, well, what's this going to mean? And how are we going to be principled in how we use this to benefit people and not to do things which would be harmful or unethical? I'm glad that she did that at the very get-go. It shows a certain approach to things. And I think that's exemplary. We should be trying to do things like that. Not, partly in our interactions with the community, it should start from listening, as you say, and then in just all of our work, we should be thinking about how will our work at the university with new ideas, how will it benefit humanity? And let's be aware of the possibility that if we're not thoughtful about it, that it might actually not do that. And that's a struggle. That's a process. It's not something that just you say it once and it's over. It's an ongoing way. It's a way of doing things.
Good. Thank you for asking that question. Mish, I wonder if I can trouble you to bring up yours back to a personal level for Paul.
Sure. Well, good morning, President. Welcome. My name is Mish Pergandy. I'm the head of marketing and communications for the Polsky Center. So I was always taught that part of leadership was having incredible self-awareness, knowing your strengths, leaning into areas to improve. And so how would you describe your leadership style? How would others describe you? And what do you want to be known for as UChicago's new leader?
Well, I do agree with you that it's really your description that having some self-awareness is as a core attribute really enables a person to be a much stronger leader. And I think when that's really absent, the consequences are significant. So I reflect on that. And whether others would describe me that way, well, I'm hesitant to say how others would describe me. I think you just have to go through being conscious of that. Let me say this. I certainly do my best to think that even not in a leadership position, but just as a human being out in the world, that every action that you take, however small, can have an influence on another person. And you have to be conscious of that as you do things to make sure that you're trying your best to make sure that each and every action that you take helps lift and improve and make a stronger contact with the people that you interact with. I keep that in mind all the time. But you have to ask others who've experienced me as a leader, or you'll have to just see how I do it as time goes on to see whether that's rhetoric or truth. Time will tell. You'll see.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Sean Carr, if you don't mind, and maybe asking a very specific question here, please.
Sure. Thank you, Paul. President Alivisatos, welcome. Just yes, very specific, somewhat self-serving question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but and I work in alumni relations and development communications. Just on that, can you think of a piece of mail, an email? Doesn't have to be from the university. Be great if it was. That kind of delighted you, really excited you, that you received recently at any time?
Okay, so going back probably about 12 years ago, I was at Berkeley and I got a little, I don't know if it was a newsletter or what it was. It wasn't a hard copy, it was electronic. And it said that the University of Chicago is going to create an Institute of Molecular Engineering as its step into engineering. And I thought to myself, well, wow, the words University of Chicago and engineering on the same page. Who knew? And not only that, but had recast it. And it wasn't civil engineering or mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, it was molecular engineering. And since, that's something that, touches my heart, I remember it pretty well. I was thinking, now that is a move. So I do remember receiving that, and it was a good one. So maybe that illustrates the point that a really successful communication talks about it shows distinctiveness, but it also kind of helps people understand a new direction or something that people are doing that is, I don't want to say always surprising, but helps them to see in a new way. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. It won't happen all the time, but that's an example I can think of.
Good. As a build on things from the world of alumni relations, I wonder how you think about this concept of alumni from the University of Chicago, the importance of working with them and them as an audience.
Oh my gosh. It's just such a fundamental thing. It's hard to overstate how important it is. Maybe I can put it in this way. If indeed the story of the university in the next period of time will be, how does this great place of new ideas, how does it manage to connect and interact with society better? All of our alums are people who are out in the world. They are our contact points into the world in so many different ways, and they can teach us so many things about the world as they have experienced it coming from the university or having been influenced by the university, but then themselves out in different walks of life. So they represent a group that has so much to teach us and to offer us. And so it's a very fundamental piece of the entire university community. They're not always present here, but they are present in some way. They remain engaged with us and helping us to think about how we do our business. So to me, it feels like it's hard to imagine a more important group to us. And again, that we have to kind of listen both ways, both tell our story and hear from them about their story and what they think about us.
Terrific. Thanks for building upon that. Ben Rissman, I see a note up here from you, and I wonder if you can present your question, please.
Hi, President Alivisatos. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good to see you again. I was thinking about it, in the context of this group, a lot of our efforts are helping contextualize and show the impact of the university, to different audiences. And as you talk about the vectors of engagement, how should this group be thinking about that? And how can we help kind of support these efforts as they start to ramp up?
Yeah, well, look, right now we're in a stage of thinking through what makes sense, what are the good ones, how will we make them work, and so on. And so part of that actually is for you to be helping us, me, the community here, be a little bit self-aware, as the question was asked, and also be aware of how our ideas can, in fact, resonate with those outside the university. I mean, it's a key piece of making these things work well. So I think that's a special role. And as we start to define them more and to feel more confident that they make sense, then helping us to tell their story will be just a vital part of everything that we do. So, so we're still in that stage of they're nascent, but as they get more solid towards the end of this quarter and as we head into the winter, I think we'll be shifting into a different mode where the goal will be to communicate those more clearly so that people who want to partner with us can understand what have we heard, what are the directions, where are we trying to go, why, and what are our hopes for that. So I'm not sure I have more practical advice than that, because I'm not sure I completely comprehend at this point how this amazing group of a couple hundred, did you say almost 300 people, or it was 250 people?
250, yeah, a couple hundred on the call here.
That's a big network of people. I'm not sure I understand the full scope of how you're out in the world communicating to be able to really, say this is how. It wouldn't be my role anyway. You would know better than I. But I think as we get better at this, your expertise in how to get our ideas and messages out there will just be absolutely foundational to any success.
Great. Thank you for that. There's a question that Sarah Tellis says is lighthearted, but I certainly don't think that it is. So Sarah, why don't you present your question to Paul?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paul. And welcome to the university. And this very serious question, and to the dramatic music. Do you happen to have a dog or a pet?
Sadly, I do not have a dog, but my older daughter just has a new dog named Oslo, who is been with her and her husband for about 2 months, and so there's a massive amount of multi-channel communication going on between Berkeley and Chicago right now about everything that Oslo does. And even this morning, a discussion about whether Oslo's report card from his first kind of training session was actually truthful. In my estimation, it was a little fluffy. I didn't feel like a true University of Chicago analysis of how things had gone, honestly. I mean, I'm very skeptical.
Well, we would love to welcome Oslo to the University of Chicago Save the Humans campaign. To your point about connecting with the community, we did a lot of market research and saw that people loved sharing information about their pets. And so there are local celebrities and pets and dogs that are sharing why they care about health research and their humans. So if Oslo would like to be featured, we would love to welcome him as part of that and share some photos. And
probably the wrong city name, but you know.
It's okay. Everyone needs to know about health research, and it's a national campaign. So
you're right, and it's a great point. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, and one of the things that Sarah didn't mention is that there was Campus Communicators Award, and her program won one of the Campus Communicators Awards on the call earlier today. So big congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have time for maybe just one more question if we can. And I've got a few more that are listed here. We can talk about, let me look.
Well, I just saw it flash by. Someone asked if I'm going to pick up my SLR.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Although SLR, you know, these days maybe more mirrorless camera, but I did bring some of my camera gear with me, and it's been sitting there looking at me accusatorily saying, there are so many subjects for you to go out and photograph your new ones. How come you're not out there doing it? And so I'm looking forward to that opportunity when I can kind of get out there and start taking some pictures again. I really enjoy doing that. So we'll see when I get my chance. But as I'm walking around, I'm looking at things and thinking, yep, that would be fun to try.
If I can conclude with a story, very recently we were doing filming for the President's and the Provost's welcome message, and we had a photographer that was here doing some work and had spent a lot of time. And he came up to me a little bit nervously toward the end of the session, and he said, I don't know how to ask you this, but the president wanted to go out with me to learn some things about photography and for me to show him some things around campus. What am I supposed to do? And I said, I think you should go with him. He would not have asked you had he not seriously meant for you to do that. And he couldn't believe that he was being asked this and that it was a genuine question. But I actually think that it most certainly was, wasn't it?
Absolutely. My take on that was that he was doing lots of stuff with his gear, and we ended up in a conversation about, you know, that stuff. And it just turned out it wasn't the gear he was using, but we both have kind of a fascination with a certain kind of camera. So it kind of came out from that. And I thought, that'd be a lot of fun. So I hope he feels that that would be something fun to do, because if not, I certainly wouldn't want to put him in an awkward spot. But yeah, it was real.
Good. Well, I think that it brings to life a lot of what you were talking about here. We do have other questions, but I know we only had to top of the hour, and hopefully we will get more and many opportunities for folks to learn from you and about you. We know how busy you are during your first month that you're here and are incredibly appreciative of the time that you would come in and share with us. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for offering me this opportunity, and thank you all of you for what you do. It's really beautiful and important.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.